Welcome friends and welcome to my channel Biology Note. In this video we will be talking about the structure of eye. And you know, eye is known as organ of vision because this will helps us to see different objects in this world. Okay, and eye is a very important sense organ, and each of the sense organs in our body contains different type of sensory receptor. Actually in our body there are present millions of sense organs, but one of the most important sense organs here we will discuss, that is the eye. Okay, and in the eye the sensory receptor cells which can detect the light are known as rod cell and cone cell. Okay, so rod cell or cone cell are two most important sensory receptor cell which is present in the retina of eye, and the rod cell becomes activated in dim light, so this helps in night vision, and the cone cell becomes activated in bright light, so this helps in daylight vision and also helps in color vision. Okay, these rod and cone cells are present inside the retina of eye. Then what is the retina? And before going to the detailed structure of the retina, first of all we should know about another covering of our eyes. Okay, actually we can see externally a very small part of eye, and the most regions of the eye remains embedded in the eye socket in our skull. Okay, and eye is a ball-like structure, and this ball is known as eyeball. Then in our skull there are present two cavities, and these cavities, and if we draw the skull structure, then this is the cavity, and in this cavity the eyeballs are present. Okay, so these are the two eyeballs, and in between the eyeball and the eye socket there are present different structure. There may be present muscles, there may be present different type of fats or the connective tissue or cartilage. So these are present in between eyeball and eye socket. Okay, and apart from this, 6 muscles remains attached with the eyeball, and these are known as ocular muscle, and with the help of this ocular muscle we can move our eye in different regions. Okay, so we can move our eyes with the help of these ocular muscles, and whose number is actually 6. Since this is a ball-like structure, so the covering of the eye is very important. The outermost covering of eye, which is the fibrous covering and which do not contains any blood vessels or any nerve, and this outermost covering is known as sclera. So this is the outermost covering of eye, and the outermost covering is known as sclera. Actually sclera constitute the 5/6 part, so 5/6 part of outer covering, and in front of sclera there are present another fibrous covering, and which is known as cornea. Then this is known as cornea. Okay, and then the anterior most part of the outer covering constitute the 1/6, and which is known as cornea, and cornea is also transparent. So light can easily passes through cornea. Okay, so light can easily passes through cornea since it is transparent. And since there are present no blood vessels in cornea, so no helper T cells can be found in cornea. So cornea can be easily grafted to another person. There will be no graft rejection, right? Then what is actually the graft rejection? And when we donate an organ or a particular organ to a person, then the person who received this organ, and this will be treated as foreign organ. Okay, our immunological system will be activated, and this will causes the rejection. But in case of cornea, we can easily donate to another person because cornea do not contain any blood vessels, so no helper T cells are actually found there, and so this can be easily grafted to another person. So cornea do not show the graft rejection. This is important. Okay, and then the outermost covering is called as the fibrous covering, and this is made up of sclera and cornea. Then just outside of the cornea there are present another covering, and which is known as conjunctiva. Okay, and conjunctiva actually not only covered the cornea, but this also covered a very small part of sclera, right? Then this is known as conjunctiva. Okay, and next to the cornea, or next interior to the cornea, another important layer are present, and which is actually the vascular layer, and this vascular layer is known as choroid. So the second layer second layer of the eye, which is vascular, that is, it is rich in blood vessels, so they can supply the nutrients to the another parts of eye, and then this vascular part is known as choroid. Okay, so this is the second layer of our eyeball. The outermost layer is the sclera, and the middle layer is choroid, and the choroid anteriorly becomes modified, and this becomes modified an important structure, and which is known as ciliary body. Okay, so this is actually the ciliary body, and the ciliary body is connected with the suspensory ligament, then this part is known as ciliary body, and which binds with the suspensory ligament, and suspensory ligament placed the lens in a particular position in our eyeball, and the lens is also transparent, so the light can be passes through the cornea and then to the lens, and then ultimately strike in the interior layer of our eyeball. Okay, and another important part which are developed from the choroid are known as iris. So, and another important part which is developed from the choroid, this is known as iris. Then this part is known as iris, and the iris contains different pigment, so our eyes becomes different color, and mainly in Indians the eyes are black color, and in another country the eyes may be blue color, and this is due to presence of pigment inside the iris. And in between iris you can see an aperture, and this aperture is known as pupil. So this aperture is known as pupil. Then light can easily enters through the pupil since this is an aperture, and in bright light we can constrict the pupil, and in dim light we can dilate the pupil, and when the dilation occurred, then a huge amount of light can be enters into our eye, and when the constriction of the pupil occurred, then the small amount of the light will be entered into our eye. Okay, so this is actually the function of pupil, and this will convey the light from aqueous humor towards the retina. Now the innermost layer of eye is known as retina. Then this is the innermost layer of eye, and this innermost layer of eye is known as retina, and this is actually the retina. Okay, then the eyeball is covered by three layers. The outermost layer, which is known as the fibrous coat, is known as sclera, and the middle layer, which is the vascular coat, is known as choroid, and the innermost layer, which is photosensitive, is known as retina. Actually, I have already told you that in retina the two important photosensitive cells are found, the rod cell and the cone cell. But you should clearly understand about the distribution of rod cell and cone cells in different regions of retina. This is important. Okay, and apart from the rod and cone cells, in retina also bears ganglionic cell, bipolar cell, and the amacrine cell. Actually, there are present 10 layers inside the retina. Then retina is very much sensitive to the light. Okay, actually the portion of the retina where light directly strikes, this portion is known as fovea. Okay, so this portion is known as fovea. This is very, very important. Then the part of retina or the point of retina where light directly strikes is known as fovea, and this is yellow pigmented, so this is also known as yellow spot. This is also known as yellow spot. Okay, and in this part a small depression can be seen, and this depression is known as fovea centralis. Okay, this is very, very important in examination point of view. Then the portion of retina or the point of retina where light strike is known as fovea, and the depression in the fovea is called as fovea centralis. And since the light directly strikes on this portion, so this portion is rich in cone cell. So this portion is rich in cone cell. because the cone is sensitive to the bright light. Okay, so the fovea contains a huge amount of cone cell. And the other part of retina, the rod and cone cells are equally distributed. Then in other part, the rod and cone cell are equally distributed. So in this region, the rod and cone cells will be equally distributed. But at the periphery, and where the retina is attached with the choroid, only the rod cells are present. Okay, then the rod cells are usually present in the periphery regions of retina. And for this reason, whenever we enter in a dark room and we see very clear of the corner of the room, because the cells are present near the periphery of retina. Okay, then hope you have understood about the distribution of rod and cone cells in the retina. And from the retina, there is presence in another important point. Okay, so in retina there is presence in another important point, and where the optic nerve start. Okay, so optic nerve start in this portion of retina, and this is known as blind spot. This is known as blind spot, or this is known as optic disc. So the point from where the optic nerve starts in the retina is known as blind spot or optic disc. This is known as blind spot because in this region there are present no rod and cone cell. So they contain no rod and cone cell. Okay, so rod and cone cell are absent in this portion, and for this reason the no images will be formed in this region. Then this is known as blind spot, or this is also called as optic disc. Okay, actually the optic nerve do not covered by any covering. Then the optic nerve actually passes from this region, and this will ultimately enters into our brain. Okay, and you know the eyeball is not actually solid. The eyeball contains two chambers. The one is aqueous chamber and another is vitreous chamber. The aqueous chamber is present in between lens and the cornea. So in between lens and cornea, the chamber which is present is known as aqueous chamber, and the aqueous chamber has two parts. One is the anterior part which is present in between iris and the cornea, and another part is called the posterior part, and which is present in between lens and cornea. So this is actually the posterior part, and this is the anterior part of aqueous chamber. And the aqueous chamber is filled with a fluid which is known as aqueous humor. Okay, so that and this aqueous humor are secreted from the ciliary body of eyes. Actually, ciliary body continuously secrete the aqueous humor, and for this reason this is very important for drainage of aqueous humor. And the structure which causes the drainage of aqueous humor into our venous blood system is known as canal of Sclera. So this is known as canal of Sclera. So the continuous drainage of aqueous humor into the venous blood system is important, and this is occurred by a structure which is known as canal of Sclera. And if this aqueous humor cannot be transported into the venous system, then the intraocular pressure will be increased, and this will causes a disease which is known as glaucoma. Okay, and this glaucoma can be damage the optic nerve. So an human can become blind if he is suffering from the glaucoma. Okay, then this is actually the story about the aqueous chamber. And in between the lens and retina, there are present in another chamber which is known as vitreous chamber. And the vitreous chamber is also filled up with fluid, and which is known as vitreous humor. And these vitreous humor are secreted from the retina during the time of development. Okay, then these are actually the major structure of our eyes. Then our eyes or the eyeball are covered by three layers. The outermost layer, which is fibrous, are known as the sclera, and the anterior part of sclera is known as cornea. Okay, and the sclera and the cornea remains covered by another structure which is known as conjunctiva, and the inflammation in the conjunctiva causes the conjunctivitis. Okay, and the middle layer of the eyeball is known as choroid, and this is actually the vascular. So this will provide the nutrients in the different parts of our eye. And the anteriorly this will form, or the choroid will form the two special structure, the ciliary body and the iris. Ciliary body usually remains attached with the suspensory ligament, and the suspensory ligament actually hold the lens in a particular position. Okay, and also this will causes the accommodation of eye. In front of ciliary body there are presence in another important structure, which is the iris, and the iris is pigmented, and due to the presence of pigment in the iris, this will causes the different eye color in different human. Okay, and in between the iris there are presence an aperture which is known as pupil. Okay, and just behind the lens there are presence a fluid filled chamber which is known as the vitreous chamber, and the fluid is known as vitreous humor. Okay, and the innermost layer of our eyeball is actually the retina, and this contains the two different type of sensory cells, the rod cell and cone cells. And apart from this, another types of sensory cells can be found in this region, but the most important are the rod cells and the cone cells. And usually the portion where the light directly strikes in the retina is known as fovea, and this is yellow pigmented, so this is also known as the yellow spot. Okay, and lateral side of the fovea in the retina there are presence in another spot where no images will be formed, and these regions is known as the blind spot, and there are presence no rod and cone cells. Actually in the fovea region a huge number of cone cells are present, but in the another region the rod cells and the cone cells are equally distributed, but at the periphery of the retina the rod cells are present. Okay, actually the different parts of our eyes, and apart from this structure, and another important structure is present in between eyeball and the orbit, and which is known as lacrimal gland. And lacrimal gland synthesize tears and which clean the eyes, and apart from this in the tear there are presence a particular enzyme which is known as lysozyme, and this will actually causes the breakdown of various types of microbes like bacteria. Okay, and in the next video we will discuss another important sense organ which is known as ear, and the structure of ear is very difficult, and in the next video we will discuss about it. So thank you, and that's it.